Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me today is Todd Shapiro. Todd is the president and CEO of the Illinois CPA Society, one of the largest CPA societies in the nation, representing more than 23,000 accounting and finance professionals. Prior to joining the society in 1998, he amassed 20 years of financial managerial experience as the director of finance for Unilever, a multinational consumer packaged goods company. Todd is regularly recognized as a thought leader in the profession and has been named to the Accounting Today's list of top 100 most influential people in accounting for the last 5 consecutive years. Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, Todd Shapiro.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
Well, first question I have for you, Todd, is why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Well, outside the fact that it's a job, and I'm paid to do this, I have always found I love a challenge. I talked to my son who's a CPA and works at McDonald's, and there's the business, what I refer to as the business of business, and it's moving things forward, whether it's our profession, whether in my past life it was hair care products. It's the challenge of trying to advance a thought. I think now it's taken a little more direct approach in the fact that since it's a professional association, I work to represent the CPA profession. It takes a little more significant impact because this is no longer about just a product. This is about advancing and advocating for an entire profession. So I find that to be mentally challenging, mentally stimulating, and you get some personal satisfaction if you can help somebody do better in their career, do better in their practice, do better in their company. There's some personal satisfaction in that.
And just curious as to what you think. We're talking now on July 21st, and we're in the midst of the COVID-19 epidemic. And there's clearly been some acceleration to some trends that were already happening within the CPA profession. What are some of those trends that you think have been significantly accelerated?
Well, some have accelerated and are being met. Some are accelerated and I think need to be met to a greater degree in a longer term. Obviously, technology became it was historically for especially a mid-sized firm or smaller firm, they could try to just keep up with technology. The idea of being in the cloud, the idea of having remote tools was gaining importance. But all of a sudden one day, and I know at the Illinois CPA Society, I met with my leadership team on March 12th and said on March 17th we're going remote. There was no time to go, let's go out and shop for the best software. This wasn't even when we tapped the 2000 issue, when we passed 2000, and we had to get ready for that. This was overnight. You had to become a remote environment in most cases. And so I think we did a lot in the profession to very quickly embrace that. I think we learned a lot. When I would talk with some firms, they would say, well, my staff is remote, but I have clients that don't want to go remote. I have clients that won't go into a portal. One of the things we very much, I think, learned as a profession is you can have the best technology in your firm in the world, but if your client only wants to mail a paper check and it has to go to the post office, then somebody's got to get that check and put it in an envelope, and it's got to get a stamp, and it's got to go to the post office. It's got to be picked up from the post office. That became a challenge. And so really you have to look end to end from technology. So I think even those firms that had done a lot realized that are they end to end? Are they truly encouraging, enforcing, trying to really push their clients to embrace the technology, at least to the point where it was useful and helpful. So I think that was a change that occurred. We kind of got slammed into it. Firms that hadn't gone remote had to figure out how to get remote, or at least some form or fashion, or the need for technology. I was in a conversation the other day and the question came up, we're in the midst of this pandemic. we're not even out of the first phase, and it's resurging. Who knows? If anybody out there who thinks that once we get through, COVID-19, we'll be done with pandemics, that's not going to be the case. So I hope the lesson to all of us is be prepared for the next one, because there will be another time where we're going to have to move into this realm. We may get a break, we may get a breather, but importantly, to look at your firm and look at not just your firm, but look at your client. If you're in a company, look at the systems within the company. Are you really, really ready end to end from a technological perspective? And that's the basic technology. That's not talking RPA. It's not talking AI, which I think are the five of the most impactful letters that this profession will see in the next 25 years, are those 5 little letters, RPA and AI. This is just what I call the basic blocking and tackling of how you run a firm or a company today and use the technology. That's I think the one thing we learned. The other thing, which I think we, to a degree, embraced and to some point we didn't, I'm an absolute believer that we are going to be looking at revolutionary change within our profession within the next 7 to 10 years. And I know people will say, we've been through change since Excel, and all. I think we are going to be looking at revolutionary change. And we've been saying, behind me you can see there's something that's trust is not enough. Well, we believe that the CPA needs to move to a more strategic advisor, to a more trusted and strategic advisor. And this was a time where businesses really needed help in many cases. And in some cases, CPAs help people fill out a PPP application. They may even help them fill out a cash flow forecast to look at their business, which is ever so critical in helping businesses survive and thrive. But this also is an opportunity in many cases for CPAs to go out to their clients or their companies and say, by the way, I refer to clients and companies because we have a lot of CPAs who work for companies. We call them, we typically, instead of saying industry, we work in corporate finance because that's where they work. But this was a wonderful opportunity to go to your clients and demonstrate that you can help them become more profitable. You can help them figure out how to manage your expenses differently. You can figure, who knows more about a business than the CPA, whether or not it's your client or it's your company. Who knows more about the inner workings of business? So were we in fact always looking at that, trying to make ourselves that strategic advisor? In some cases we were. In some cases, somebody needed help with a PPP application, they filled it out and that was it. And now when they got to do the forgiveness, fill out the form for forgiveness, they're going to help fill out the forgiveness form. Those are sort of compliance things. And I think we need to move past compliance. And I think in some cases we did. And in some cases, I think we sort of did some additional compliance things that helped our clients and our companies, but is it really taking us to the next level?
Is there anything that you think that is not going to stick? That there's going to be something out there that, that was fine for COVID, but now let's go back to the way things were.
Well, that's a boy, I hadn't thought of that one. So I guess you want me to think on my feet here. Things that aren't going to stick. I hope that the things that we are doing, where in fact sometimes now clients that may have looked at you as their auditor, their tax guy, and now they needed help for their business. I really hope that sticks, that they look to you beyond that. I think there's the real question is our style of work. I'm in my office today. I've been in my office I was the guy getting the mail. So for 4 months now, I've been coming to the office when we are volunteer. We were remote for 2 months, and we've been volunteer for the last month and a half. I think there's a real question as to what our style of work is going to be. Different people have different views, whether or not firms are going to go to 100% remote environments. What's the culture? How do you keep a culture? I think it's trying to maintain the culture. I'm not saying you can't have a positive culture in a remote environment. It's a different way of managing through that. So I don't know if the stickiness of staying remote will happen, because I think people like to interact with people. Maybe that's old school. I don't think it is necessarily, because I know people of all ages think that. So I do think we'll see people back physically working with clients, physically working together in offices, because it is a good way for people to have interaction, share ideas and thoughts, and in a much more casual setting. So that may be the one thing I think won't stick. I hope the rest of it does.
And Todd, we have an exit question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, who is a hero of yours? Why are they a hero?
Boy, that's a really good question. Who's a hero of mine? I'm a little bit of a political junkie. So, when I've thought about this before, and I think about change, one of the things that I believe very much is change is not a bad thing. Change is a good thing. In our office, we have it's not uncommon for me to say the best reason is to change is because you haven't. And the best reason, an old saying, if it isn't broke, don't break it. Well, we say if it isn't broke, break it. So I'm going to tell you, the person who that takes courage. And I always go back to Abraham Lincoln, that it's easy to lead when things are going well. It's easy to be a partner in a firm when things are going really well and things are growing and everything else. It's easy to be in a company when sales are growing and you're just profitable. The hard stuff is when there's controversy, when there's issues to deal with, when there's challenging crises ahead of you, and that's when leadership. And I very much believe that's when leaders really show their leadership. And I always go back to Abraham Lincoln. He led us through a part of our history that was probably the most, if not the most challenging part of our history. It was the second most challenging part of our history. You can go back to the Revolution. So Abe Lincoln has always been a hero of mine. And if I had to have anybody's courage, and would love to talk to somebody today in history about how they got through it and how they really had the intestinal fortitude to do that, Abe Lincoln's the guy.
And lastly, Todd, how can somebody contact you?
You can reach me directly at shapirot@icpas.org. That's SHAPIROT at icpas.org. You can call me at 312-517-7601. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
All right. Todd Shapiro, President and CEO of the Illinois CPA Society. Thanks so much for being a guest on the Sage Advice podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
For more Sage Advice, visit and subscribe at sageadvicepodcast.com.